Hey weirdos, how are you? It's Riot. I have said many times I was going to put on record my rants about one of my favorite 80s childhood sitcoms, Punky Brewster. Many of you have heard my rants about it several times. But it's time to bring the facts together to realize this girl needs therapy. So really it all came to be when the new remake came out about a year or two ago. Soleil Moon Frye reprising the child character, now as an adult, now as a mom. And as much as I will say she became one very attractive mom, it's just very weird how a show still made as a kid's sitcom seemed to be oddly about her sex life. Her main problems were that she was addicted to adopting, which was weird to begin with, and super problematic, and that she kept sleeping with her ex-husband. That's not so much of an issue, except for the fact that her kids were really supportive of her getting past that, so they were constantly trying to get her dates, teaching her how to use Tinder and so forth. 21st century, everybody. So, it reminded me of the little parts of the show that I'd seen before, so I thought I would go back and watch the whole damn thing. I was not a super fan when I was a kid. Maybe I was an insecure boy, and she was sort of a tomboy, probably, because she was maybe only like 2 years older than me, maybe 3 or 4, that my insecurities came in, so I didn't watch it as a child. But I've grown to love it as much as I still stand by what I said. This girl needs therapy. To start the concept of the show, it is about a little girl at approximately 8 years old who is abandoned at a grocery store by her mom, and her dad is already long gone. So she sneaks into an apartment building and lives in a spare room in the apartment building. Spare apartment. But the elderly superintendent finds her and takes her in, and eventually applies for adoption to take care of her. Even if it is quite begrudgingly, because he is a aging bachelor. She's also followed by her dog Brandon, and she has a group of best friends. Later, they got a cartoon where they got a thing called Glomer, which is basically a Mogwai and a leprechaun in one. That's not canon. At least I don't think it is. At least I don't think it is. But it was just the concept that in the new remake, I know she was an adult and a beautiful adult, but I didn't want to hear that about the mixed-match shoe-wearing, wannabe astronaut, tough little girl, Punky Brewster. I even was weirded out in season 4 of the show, where she dated 2 boys at the same time and made them go to 2 different movies so that she could go on dates with both of them at the same time and played them, so then they dumped popcorn on her. That was weird for me. However, also in season 4, there's a great moment where she takes over her father's restaurant. Her father only runs a restaurant at the end of season 3. Not a usual subject. But anyway, she takes it over while he's away, because he had to close while he was away traveling. So she decided she would open it so they wouldn't lose money. And a man having an affair on his wife, who has a hearing aid and is a narcoleptic, complicated, breaks up with his girlfriend, and then happens to fall asleep. And Punky thinks that she poisoned him because his hearing aid is broken, so she can't wake him up while he is passed out. So she thinks he's dead. She calls the cops and an ambulance. They come, but they recognize him. And they smack him around and wake him up because evidently this happens all the time. Fear of death. Being narcoleptic and hard of hearing and a bigamist. Anyway, in the very last episode of the show, in season 4, because it only went 4 seasons, she marries off her dog to another dog. I don't get it either. Though, the real issues come into play at around season 2. Now, again, I emphasize that this girl needs therapy, because only like 3 episodes into the show, she goes grocery shopping with her dad, and her dad loses her in the grocery store, and so she panics and she just leaves because she assumes that if she misses somebody in a grocery store, even that they're just in different aisles, like we all haven't got lost in the aisles of a grocery store before, but she just assumes that means that's where parents dump their kids, so she leaves and has a breakdown. Now that's all fine and well, because that had only happened, months before to her, and she was really young. However, we jump ahead to season 4 again, where she is finding that she is having a... How do we put this? She is growing up, and she's growing breasts, so she needs to go bra shopping. And her dad's having a panic about that because he's, never had kids before and is a single parent, and he says to himself, oh, I wish she would never grow up. So she runs away because she thinks because she has to grow up, he'll not want her. And she has another breakdown. So, what I'm saying is, this girl needs therapy. But it's all about death in season 2, though. Death is already a thing because she never finds her family, so maybe they're dead. But she has multiple Halloween episodes. One, a two-parter, where she goes camping and meets a native tribe, which seemed a little stereotypical, but with her name being Soleil Moon Fry, it's probably part of her own history, so it's probably something pretty touching to her. But that leads to them going into a haunted cave, and then just turns into Poltergeist and It, where she has to fight a giant spider, and all of her friends get killed and become ghosts, but then they come back, and it's all a dream. But one of the characters from the dream appears and says goodbye, so maybe it wasn't a dream, so she went through it. It really happened. This is why she needs therapy. It then leads to the classic Halloween episode where there's a creepy old lady that lives in an apartment building, and she wants to be friends with her, but she's mean and thinks maybe she's a witch. So she gets scared when she's a witch, but in fact it scares the old lady, who falls over and breaks her hip. And then they gotta get her out of her apartment and drag her to the hospital so that she can repair her hip, and then she becomes a dancer. That's the actual Halloween episode. Part of season 2, she learns how to fight. She punches out a tough girl. Then she later shoplifts. She blames it on her black teacher, who they immediately arrest. And she's got to come tell the truth. Very weird. Just uncalled for, Punky. Jesus. Then there's the famous getting locked in a refrigerator episode where her best friend is hide-and-go-seek game, has them hide in there, and the door sticks on them, so they pass out because they lose the oxygen. But luckily, Punky had learned CPR and brings her back to life. But then the very next episode, a bunch of older girls come by with a weird assortment of drugs. And we got to teach you about drugs. It's the token drug episode, which isn't so bad if it wasn't for the next episode being about the son of Sam stalking people, and they're coming to her town, and she thinks the son of Sam is going to kill her dad because there's a serial killer on the loose. Yeah. And that episode just goes nowhere. Just nobody dies, so it's good. Until the episode where the Challenger explodes. She always wanted to be an astronaut, but she watched it in school and watched them all die live on TV, so she has a breakdown. Luckily, Buzz Aldrin shows up and cheers her up.
What I can't forgive them is in literally season 1, there's a whole episode where her dog Brandon is hit by a car, and they lead up to the very, 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 very end that the dog's going to die.
And let's also just take a second just to think of the guest stars that appeared on the show, specifically musical guest stars.
Of course, the dog's obviously dead now.
For having Andy Gibb teach Punky piano, dies of a drug overdose. Then her favorite band that her dad goes out of the way to get them to come visit her is DeBarge, who infamously, one of them gets arrested for being a drug kingpin, and another one dies of an overdose too. The 80s.
Fuck, Eddie Deason was on that show for the first season. That's enough to make anyone have troubles. Oh, troubles. Remember that time that Punky hooked up her adopted father with a biker? And he was into it? Then there's that episode where Cherry's cousin can't read, and when her younger cousin goes under the sink and drinks bleach, then the older cousin doesn't know what to tell 911 because she picks up the bleach and doesn't know what it says. When the operator just says, "What did the child drink? Why is the child going into a coma on the floor?" And the other girl just reads, "I can't read!" She says, "I can't read!" And then the baby almost dies.
At least Punky never burned down her family's apartment. She'll always have that over Webster. What the hell, Webster?
Now, I know I just skipped past the serial killer episode, referencing Son of Sam, but specifically being the Night Stalker. They even call the killer the Night Stalker. But other than that, that's all there is really to tell about that episode. It just is what it is. One of my favorite episodes, however, all around, is the episode where a nun comes to the house and asks if they have anything to give to charity. And Punky sees an urn and says, "This ugly thing, you never use this. Here, have it." And then later finds out that it has the ashes of her adopted father's aunt. Why that's just laying around in the closet, I don't know. But she decides she has to get it back. So she goes to the convent and asks if she can have it back, but they say they're busy. And she decides she'll sneak in with her friend Cherry, and they would steal a nun's habit. And like two kids sneaking into a movie, Punky sits on Cherry's shoulders, so they're a very, very tall nun. They show up at a gathering where the nuns are all having dinner as the Monsignor is coming over to visit, and they sit down and have dinner with them, obviously being two kids in a habit, sitting on each other on a chair at a dinner table. And then they find out that the urn is being used as a sugar bowl now. So they're under the impression that they have just put sugar into the coffee of the Monsignor mixed with their great aunt's ashes. Until the very, very end, where she finds out there were two urns and they mix them up, and that was just an extra one. Also, mortality for Punky herself is a very weird thing. Let's get back to the trauma here. So in the first 4 episodes ever of the show, she's being told by an adoption agency that she cannot be adopted by Henry, the new adopted older father. And she keeps escaping from orphanages to get back with him. And then they just let him have her. And at one point, he gets sick, and he thinks he's dying. And in turn, then, again, she has to go back to the orphanage. Then in another episode, because of his business situation not doing so well, because most sitcoms, when children are adopted in them, because there's a whole bunch of those, they're usually adopted by rich people, but Punky's dad is not. Do you guys remember that time that he was chief of police, or at least the head of the police academy, and maybe or maybe not got a blowjob from Mahoney? Anyway, that's not important. What's important is that, again, because he's financially not doing that well, the adoption papers fall through at the end of the 2nd season, and she is moved off with a rich family, which she decides to screw them over because all she wants to do is be with Henry, who she really doesn't know that much, and is very attached to him immediately after her mom ditching her. This girl needs therapy. But as she witnesses his mortality of being old, but he gets over it. It's fine, whatever, he's over it. She has an episode where she's afraid of going to the dentist, so she gets a lucky quarter from Henry and believes that that gives a magic that will make her brave, so she can go to the dentist. And that's like first season, and she's like 8, and she's traumatized at everything as it is, so whatever. But then we jump ahead to near the end of season 4, where she is quite a bit older, but she has to have her appendix taken out because her appendix has burst, and she's going to die if she doesn't. But she's so afraid of the hospital because of all the bad things she's seen at it, even knowing that her best friend Cherry's grandma that lives above them is a nurse and has always been one as long as they've known her. She's still so paranoid she hides in the hospital while falling down in a linen closet, slowly dying from being poisoned by her ruptured appendix. But then they find her, and they take it out, and she's over it. Being around a nurse, I guess, helped her at some point. At one point, she has that cliche sitcom episode where her and her friend Cherry are having a fight, and one of them falls, and Cherry breaks Punky's arm. But Punky's over it. She's fine. She doesn't care at this point. It's one point where she totally didn't care about being in the hospital. Continuity, people. But at one point, they are going up an elevator that shuts down. And, of course, what's in there with them? A pregnant woman. So they have to help a pregnant woman give birth in the elevator. Now, let me tell you, that is a sitcom trope and a half. Offhand, I can think of when that happened to Marky Post on Night Court, and I can also think of the infamous Elf Christmas special, where Elf has to help a woman deliver a baby as he's stuck in an elevator with her. I was about to say escalator, because this whole world is just weird and screwed up. Anybody else almost die on that show? Oh, there's that one time that with Fat Kid from Monster Squad, she gets him so mad that he wants to commit suicide, so he climbs outside of the window of his apartment building and threatens to jump off. And then Punky's got to go out there and get him back. Which again, ironically, the actor who played that kid, who was only in that one season, and they kicked him out, Horace from the Monster Squad, he lived to be an adult, but I believe he did actually commit suicide. That shit's dark. So, moral of the story is, I love Punky Brewster. It's such a fun, carefree, and she's a great role model on her own. That she's young, but she's determined. She wants to make a presence of herself. She doesn't care if she's doing what the boys do or what the girls do. Just wants to do what she wants to do without hurting people and making people as happy as possible. But, in the long run, through this whole scenario, this girl needs therapy.
Punky Brewster!
Oh boy, I stay right here, not moving, sitting still, keeping eye on TV.